What it do, anime crew? I just finished playing Bramble, the Mountain King, and I'm just going to talk about it for a little bit here because I thought it was a pretty interesting little game. Bramble, the Mountain King, to get some just preliminary stuff out of the way. It's like a 4 to 6 hour long single player game. I don't know anything about the team who developed it, but I'm pretty sure they're very indie, they're very unknown, and they're very much foreign. But it's available on PS4, Xbox, and PC, and I would recommend playing it. I got it on discount for like $12. But to get to talking about the actual game, and the reason I bought it is because it is, at first, and you would understand what I mean if you've played Little Nightmares and then you play through the first like hour and a half of Bramble. But at first I was like, wow, this is the highest quality knockoff I've ever seen, but this is just a knockoff of Little Nightmares. Like, they had all the same stuff. I'm like, I swear to God, they're stealing assets at this point. You know, they've got the little monster that roams around like just under like the surface, like the shoe monster in Little Nightmares, and then you have to like jump on like the big objects in there and like slowly wade your way through like the sticky sewage as the monster like prowls underneath. Like literally just scene for scene the same thing that was in Little Nightmares. Obviously they had a scene where you get captured and put into a like weird rectangular cage and then placed up really high on a shelf where you have to run back and forth to ram yourself off of the shelf and break out of the cage. It's just there are a few too many similarities for it not to be a little bit eye-rolly, you know, but the game really did win me over, especially in the second half, because even when I thought it was just, you know, some sort of lowly knockoff of Little Nightmares, I was like, well, obviously this game still has a good deal of, you know, creative energy put into it because it's absolutely beautiful. It's stunning. The actual character models themselves are a bit uncanny, but hey, you know, that works for a horror game. And the atmospheres, the depersonalized shot compositions, shooting it's sort of like that old Resident Evil style camera where every time you walk into a new area the camera's just from like a totally other place. Sometimes it's like from behind a window peering into the alleyway that you're walking through. Super dynamic. The devs at Bramble Inc. definitely made sure to mix it up and made it an incredibly dynamic visual experience as you make your way through this forest that's filled with beasts of Norwegian folklore. So, unlike Little Nightmares, which is a game that's known for its wordless storytelling, detailed atmosphere, dynamic level design, this series definitely has those things to a lesser extent, but while Little Nightmares has a little bit more of a through line of aesthetic from like beginning to end, like there's always that sort of like deep blue oceanic color palette. There's always those same weird warped desks and things of drawers. You know, in Little Nightmares 1, you always have that boat, submarine imagery the whole way through. And so even though you go through different areas that feel unique and they feel like their own, you can tell you're in Little Nightmares. You can tell you're in that same spot immediately. It's super easily identifiable. And that's part of why Little Nightmares is like an aesthetic masterpiece. But, while Little Nightmares does that, this game, and I may only be saying this because my exposure to folklore and folktales growing up was always just in the context of like children's stories that told you about like many at once, but I do feel like this game more so resembles an anthology as opposed to one coherent story throughout. Obviously there's a very rudimentary plot line of this kid is looking for his sister and he wants to save her. You know, it's not so different from like the plot in Little Nightmares, except, you know, in Little Nightmares, this whole entire time you don't realize that they're setting you up for a giant emotional climax at the end, which just rips your heart out because it's the best game ever, and they don't even have to, you know, have a line of dialogue to do that, or even have facial expressions because the characters are like little chibi guys with masks on that don't emote. But I'm just gonna suck on Little Nightmares' proverbial penis for like an hour. If I get too caught up on it, I'll try to have that be the last thing I say. The point is, Bramble is a really good game in its own right. It doesn't quite have that same sort of immediately recognizable aesthetic, but it has a sense of photorealism to the backgrounds and a great sound effects. The sound design in this game is absolutely exceptional. There's also more of an emphasis on boss fights in this game. It's definitely more of a fighting man's game. You get up into the face of these like disturbing, disgusting creatures in varied ways that never get old, even though not all the boss fights are built equally. Some of them are not as engaging and dynamic as others. The final boss is a big letdown, but it's interesting. It's, like I said, like I've been reiterating, it's more of an anthology. It doesn't flow quite as seamlessly as something like Little Nightmares does, but it's just like a rapid fire collection of like really cool ideas, really cool moments, really cool aesthetics, and all throughout this time, you're slowly getting familiarized with this Norwegian folklore, which is so cool. I love it when a game just teaches me randomly something that I would have never known if I hadn't played it. And this Norwegian folklore stuff is really cool. And back to the idea of uncanniness, it's folklore that comes from, very similar ideas to, folklore that I might be a little bit more familiar with, but it's just slightly different. And the way that it's portrayed is just slightly different. And it's just super, absolutely creepy. There's this one creature called the Nacken. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but it's Nacken. And I'm never going to forget that, because the most like shocking, surprising, terrifying moment in the series, arguably, is when the Nacken just pops up out of the water and starts attacking you out of nowhere. It's absolutely terrifying because of the game's like photorealistic look. And I'm never gonna forget the Nacken now. Now I know the story of him. I won't really rehash the story too much here, but to summarize it real quick, it's a folklore story of a guy. He played music. His talents weren't appreciated. They bullied him, so he played music and he killed everyone, but he accidentally also killed the girl he loved. And then he was like sad, and then now he spends the rest of his days alone by the lake playing his music. And if anybody's lured in by them, he kills them as well, because he's just like a little boiling pot of rage sitting on the edge of the earth, dangling his feet pretty much. But it's in the water too, which makes it 10 times scarier. Don't go in the water in this game. The water is where all the terrifying stuff is. So if you play Bramble, just keep in mind, if you're going in the water, you're going to have to go in it. There's no avoiding it, but just brace yourself every single time you see water. Except that one time where you walk into the water and it's just like a big toad and he licks you and then you laugh. That dude's fucking solid. I fuck with that dude. But either way, Bramble. I'm going off on a bit of a Bramble Ramble here. The monster design is obviously, it can't so much be attributed to the team of Bramble as much as, Nordic folklore itself. Although I'm sure there's a lot of different iterations, so yeah, maybe I won't go too gung-ho discrediting the team of Bramble here. The monster design is really solid for the most part. You got trolls, you got, you got witches, you got trolls, you got rare designer clothes. Wait, no, that's a, Logic. That's a Logic line. That took me a minute. Bobby Tarantino, biracial king. But you got witches, you got trolls, you got other witches, you got other trolls. A lot of witches and trolls. You got like haggard creatures like the Nacken. You've got the corrupt like fallen king. You've got these like plant creatures. That's what the titular Bramble are, like these like roots that constrict and pretty common imagery across all cultures, but there's a lot of cool stuff going on. The shapeshifter is one of the absolute coolest. A lot of witches and a lot of trolls, though. And as I've said many times, the photorealistic approach contrasts sharply, for example, the Little Nightmares approach. Little Nightmares has some of the most unique and uncanny character design, as well as the way that they design the characters' mannerisms, the voices. Oh my god, Little Nightmares, absolute aesthetic masterpiece. I can't avoid its thick bulge. Like like I just can't. I gotta lick it and suck it off like as much as I can, as frequently as I can, because it's just so good in so many ways. But I'm going to try to digress and say that Bramble has a I almost said it. It has a very cinematic style. As I said before, you have these like dynamic and varied cinematic approaches with the camera angles. You get a couple of like drug-like, dream-like, trippy sequences. There's a big range in like the amount of music that's played as you go from like different area to different area. There are the sound design is just absolutely exceptional and like brutally realistic. It is shot like a movie. Like the action sequences in some of these boss fights, like it frequently changes camera angle, but it pays great attention to make sure that it's never disorienting and distracting and infuriating to play. Like, say, some of the earlier Dark Souls games where you're just staring at the boss's crotch and just glitching through its leg and hitting it in the foot for 20 minutes or whatever. It's well designed, it's well executed, and it's just an absolutely beautiful game. Probably wouldn't be the worst game to watch somebody play as opposed to playing, if I'm going to be entirely honest, because there are a couple times in this game where they'll repeat a gameplay loop that's not especially engaging or unique, like when you search around the room for like the witch's potions, you have to do that twice, and like the first time it was already getting really old. By the end of it, I was like, okay, it's a little cute novel trick, and then you have to do it again. It's like, okay, you could definitely watch somebody play this. You'll definitely get a lot of the good stuff with and cut out a lot of the fluff if you watch somebody play it. So that's probably what I would recommend, but also like it's always going to be a little bit better if you're the one playing it. In my opinion, that's just the type of person I am, but it's not a half bad alternative is all I'm saying. Bramble overall is a game that has inconsistent but pretty interesting gameplay mechanics. It steals a lot from Little Nightmares, especially in the earlier half, but to the point where the earlier half just feels like almost an homage. But maybe that's just because I'm so Little Nightmares brained and I glaze the game so much that I just can't see any game with a similar premise as anything other than a variant of Little Nightmares. But I'm pretty sure I'm not coming from nowhere here. I've played Little Nightmares, I've played Inside, I've played Limbo, I've played all these games. They're all weirdly really good. And Bramble is absolutely no different. I would look into maybe a playthrough, or if you got the $12 to throw at it, I definitely recommend giving it a shot, because it's a super interesting game with some super interesting vibes. That Norwegian folklore brings a vibe of sort of rural, superstitious uncertainty, that like real tense vibe, and you get all this like. The soundtrack has a bunch of amazing, great, unnerving folk music. And overall, I would say this game is just generally a great showcase of the lore, of the folklore, of these creatures, of the culture they come from. And in that sense, I really admire it. It's not the most flowing, perfect game ever. It's not a game with revolutionary gameplay or anything like that, but it certainly has its moments in every respect. And as an overall aesthetic effort, it was a very pleasant surprise for me. So that's about all I have to say about Bramble. That's my little Bramble Ramble, but Little Nightmares always finds its way to weasel its way on in there.